glad you're here this morning. This is January the 20th. It's August the 21st. And we're going to talk about our experiences in social work today. And I think, first of all, I'd really like to know how you happened to get into social work. I knew you only through PTA.
I'm really not a social worker, and I just happen to be on the periphery of social work. When you say, how did I get into it, I think I just kind of stumbled in.
Well, when did you start working?
when was it? 73?
73, oh. You hadn't been professionally employed before that?
No, I was a volunteer like you all my life. And there was a vacancy at the volunteer center, and I was on the board at that time. And someone said, why don't you take it, Betty, for the time being? And then Kay Bixby called me and said, I'll come to work for the volunteer center. So that was my auspicious beginning.
That's right. Well, I think that was a very auspicious beginning. I think PTA experience led a lot of us volunteers into doing things more professionally. Of course, I consider myself a professional volunteer.
And that's what I call myself.
And that's what I think of you, too. But you have taken courses and things, too, as you've gone along. Tell me about all the jobs you've had.
Well, I started as the branch director for the Asian American branch of the Volunteer Center. Then I went on to become the director of the Foster Grandparent Program, and then the associate directorship, and then for a while I was the acting director of the Volunteer Center, and then I retired last year.
And then you were doing something for the down City Hall, weren't you?
We had the Mayor's Advisory Council.
Oh, that's
on
what I was thinking,
volunteerism,
yeah.
And I chaired that after Amita Army was the first chair, and I was the third chair. And it's been fun working that.
But you did an awful lot in the foster grandparents program, and I remember you've trotted off to Washington so many times. I think you have lent a great deal of expertise both to Los Angeles, the state, and the nation.
Well, that was really funny because when the vacancy occurred in the directorship of the foster grandparent program, and Kay Bixby said, why don't you take it? I had no background in gerontology, so then I thought, well, this is a real challenge. Let me try my hand at it. And off I went to SC for their summer school in gerontology, and I was doing the foster grandparent program at the same time. One thing led to another, and eventually after 3 or 4 years, I became the regional vice president for the foster grandparent program. And so I was trotting off to Washington all the time.
What did you find most gratifying? The voluntary work or the professional work?
Oh, I think it's about equal. I think it's comparable. There are satisfactions from each as a volunteer and as a professional person.
Well, did you encounter any obstacles along the way?
As a volunteer or as a professional?
Either way. I think they would be interesting at any point.
As a volunteer, I had to overcome some of the stereotypes and myths of Asian Americans. For instance, when I first started PTA in Madison, Wisconsin, I was asked to be the Arts and Crafts chairman, the stereotype being that Asians make things with their hands and do it well. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. I want to be the parent education chairman or the legislation chairman. And so it was a matter of overcoming the myths and the stereotypes. And but other than that, I didn't find too many prejudices or things to overcome.
I think we'd next like to know about what past strategies you were involved in and you used to accomplish your goals. Did you have to be new strategy?
Whenever there was a barrier, Marge, I felt the best way to overcome them was to be direct.
Yeah.
And I didn't have much time for being subtle. So I just, as the example I used, being the arts and crafts chairperson, I just said, I don't think I want to do that. I'd rather do something else. And after the initial shock, people let me have my way.
Well, I think that you have done a magnificent job. We all know that. But I don't know if everybody knows about all the many things you've done, because I knew you in PTA days, and that was back in the 50s. And prior to that, I think you had been in Manzanar before that, so that must have been in the early 40s.
Now, my parents were in Manzanar. I went to Santa Anita Relocation Camp, Santa Anita Assembly Center, and then to Jerome, Arkansas Relocation Center.
Oh.
My number 2 son was born in Santa Anita. What was yesterday the parimutuel ticket office suddenly became the hospital, and my number 2 son was born there. Because I was pregnant with him, when we went to Santa Anita, the soldiers gave us the stable boys' room, and we actually had a floor and windows. It was just one room, but our friends came by who were living actually where the horses were living yesterday, and came by and said, gee, at least you have a floor. But we were a little over a year in the relocation camp. We were one of the first families to be allowed out, and I think the authorities let us out because I was continually complaining about this or that or some other thing, and I think they were
paid to complain in that case. That's a very good strategy.
That's a strategy of a sort.
Well, I keep thinking about that, and I never realized that you didn't stay right in California the whole time. And I'm sure your son had no ill effects from his first year.
No, the number 2 son who was born in Santa Anita teaches history for LA Unified School District now, and he has been heard to say, Christ and I, we were born in the manger. It's a little bit far-fetched, but...
Well, I think that we have a lot to learn from your activities. Do you, I know that in your work with the aged, you've done a lot, you had a lot of influence on both politics and legislation.
A little.
Can you cite any special instances?
Well, I think the activity that I'm very proud of, that I had a small part, was when I realized that the demographics in the nation were changing. There are more and more older persons in our nation. It has been said that within this decade, there'll be more senior citizens than teenagers in this nation, and that'll be a first for the United States. And the city of Los Angeles did not have a Department of Aging. It had a Department for Recreation, Department for Public Works, Department for Airport, and everything else. It did not have a department for the elderly. So I went to the mayor and to Councilman Cunningham, who was in office at that time, and said, the city of Los Angeles needs a Department of Aging. The aging affairs were being taken care of in the Community Development Department. It was a division within a huge department. And so both the mayor and the councilman agreed that we should make tentative efforts. And we, the senior citizens of this city, lobbied the city council, and a motion was put through, and the Department of Aging was created. It took almost 3 years, and we finally managed to do it.
Well, I think that you probably used both professional and volunteer skills in accomplishing this.
Yes, it was a mix.
What is your opinion about measures that can be enacted by either a social worker or a professional or volunteers? How can they undertake to affect programs and policies that would be more or less effective?
One of the ways that we can affect change is to give testimony whenever called upon, whether it's before a governmental body like the House Select Committee on Aging, or whether it's before private nonprofit agencies like United Way. I think United Way has come a long way in their attitude and treatment of the minorities in this county. The recognition of minorities is there now, and every effort is being made to address those needs. So I think we can all, whether we're professionals or volunteers, as lay people, when called upon, we should speak out.
What significant changes have you observed between the things, social work practices, and either as a volunteer or professional, as when you started working in volunteer work?
I think there are many more of us, and that helps.
Yeah.
And I think social workers no longer, to use the old cliche, live in their own ivory tower. They're down to earth. They're among the people.
We'll have to stop for a second. We're back to the interview again. We never mentioned the fact that this is Marjorie Schwarz interviewing Betty Kozasa. We've been long time friends, and that's why we've been so casual about this. But I do think that the things that Betty, that you have done, have had an impact both in the nation and the state, locally. So, what particularly has come out of all your activity?
I think going to Washington, testifying before congressional committees, going to Washington to try to influence action, the federal agency which primarily deals with volunteerism has had long-term effect. I think prior to this decade, there hasn't been much awareness of minorities, or if there has been awareness, there was a question of, are they any different? Do they have to be treated any differently? What about cultural differences? And I think, if anything, I've been able to make those who are in decision-making positions aware of the need to respond to those particular needs of the community. And on the state level, I think having served on the Commission on Aging has helped to influence the fact that in large urban areas like Los Angeles, there is great diversity, and that we need to take care of the diversity, that one regulation doesn't help all, that there needs to be exceptions, there needs to be an opportunity for everyone to participate in governmental projects.
You and I know what action is, but I'm afraid maybe the people who might listen to this in the future wouldn't know about action. Maybe you'd like to tell us a little about that.
Action, as I said, is the federal agency primarily concerned with volunteerism. Within Action, there is a section called the Older American Volunteer Programs, and the three programs are the Foster Grandparent Program, Retired Senior Volunteer Program, RSVP, and the Senior Companion Programs. And the programs are very limited. We'd like to see greater congressional attention to it. By that I mean greater allocation of funding so that the programs can be expanded. But at one time, Peace Corps was a part of Action, but it no longer is.
Well, I think that the Los Angeles Volunteer Center administers those programs for the federal government.
The Volunteer Center of Los Angeles is one of the few agencies in the nation that has all three of the older American volunteer programs, and it administers them well.
How long have they been doing that?
RSVP first came to the Volunteer Center in the early 70s, and then the Foster Grandparent Program was acquired, and finally the Senior Companion Program.
Well, I remember each time when they came on, because I was on the board of Volunteer Center in most days.
And voted to accept them.
Because you were just beginning your
That's
professional
right.
career when I started on the board. But in between times, if I remember correctly, you were involved with the community relations in its various forms here in Los Angeles, the organizations that worked in that field.
Harriet Whittier recruited me to the Community Relations Conference of Southern California, and I spent most of my time as part of the Portraits of American Women, and we went in a panel format wherever we were invited, from San Diego to Santa Barbara, and each of us told of our background, who we were, what we were. We were all different ethnically, religiously, different ages, and we said, think of us all as American women, but all of us different. And the lesson was we should appreciate each other's differences and not look upon them as negatives. And I spent my time with the Community Relations Conference doing that. And then I became involved in other things and didn't have much to do except contribute my membership for maybe 20 years. I went back a couple of years ago, and suddenly I'm chairing the agency now.
Oh, that's wonderful. How long is your term?
1 year.
Will you be reelected?
One more year.
Well, you really didn't retire then when you left the Volunteer Center. What else would you like to tell us about your various activities in Southern California?
Well, I've been active in the coordinating council movement, and when it was really a force in the county, its activities have declined somewhat.
You don't hear about it anymore.
No, and one of the reasons is because the county saw fit to pull out its staffing. At one time, the county staffed the coordinating council.
No.
But that was felt to be a conflict of interest, so the county pulled back on that funding, and as a result, it has suffered. I've been active in, as you know, United Way and Red Cross Blood Bank. I still give blood. Now you can give blood till you're 100.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
They've removed the age barrier, so you can continue to give blood, and so I do that. And I've been on the National Committee of Japanese American Citizens League on their gerontology committee. I've been active in AARP on their state legislation committee, and that's been fun, and a variety of other things.
Well, the United Way has made a conscientious effort to bring in the all the minorities, but they've worked very closely with the Japanese American community, and I know I've heard some of their budgets, and the committee has been very active throughout the years. Do you think that the community is being served very well at the moment?
Not to the extent of its needs, because the needs are
But are the people willing to accept help? And if we establish the programs, will they accept them and participate?
And we have to make the outreach and the effort to tell them that the services are available and that they're available in their own language in many instances, and they're culturally acceptable. You do know that there's Asian Pacific Community Fund comparable to the Brotherhood Crusade,
right,
just as there's one being established in the Hispanic community. So it's an effort to augment the work of the United Way, because United Way is never going to be able to answer all of the needs of all of the various groups.
Well, our community has grown so fast, and by amalgamating all of them, it's become almost unwieldy, in my opinion. But I am glad to see that they're forming their own separate groups.
And it's not in competition with United Way. I want to make that clear. It's, I feel, an augmentation of what United Way is trying
But
to do.
But it's not taking the money away from United Way.
No.
Apparently not, because our goal for this year is $100 million. So, and we made 96 million last year. So I think we're reaching it. But
yes,
compared to the size of the community we tap, it still isn't enough money to meet all the needs.
And when we compare Los Angeles to Minneapolis, we don't do as well, do
The
we?
per capita giving
No.
is very low. I realize that. And I've been crying about that.
Yeah.
I still feel that a lot of people in the community send money back to the community they came from, because historically the ties are there,
Yes,
and the traditional and family reasons, they still send money away from here, which is sad.
And then there are the people who don't give at all because we haven't been able to touch them.
And they don't come out of the woodwork
No.
either, so
We
makes
have a lot
it
of work.
very, very hard to reach them.
There's a lot of work to be done.
I hope there are a lot of young people coming along to do the work, though. Because I think that I see amongst my own friends a lot of attrition, and both in burnout and
otherwise.
yeah. Well, Betty, it's been lots of fun interviewing. I think that maybe you want to tell us one or two more things, or have we covered your career?
I think we've exhausted the possibilities.
Well, it's been a great fun interviewing you, and remember, this is Betty Kozasa, who's been telling us that really relating the Japanese American community to the work we're doing and to the state and the community. Marge Schwarz signing off.
Thank you, Marge.